Okay, everybody. We're going to get the webinar kicked off. Um, First of all, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time zone you're in right now. I'm Steve Moynihan. I'm an advisor with Viewst, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's webinar entitled Creative Automation for Designers. Our guest today is Luis Mendez, who's an Adobe certified instructor and a creative design leader. So meeting creative demand is tougher than ever. And in today's webinar, Luis is going to present a number of tools and options to help maximize your creative production operations and enhance your volume without expanding your current team size or risking your content's quality. But before I turn it over to Luis, a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you do have questions, please drop them into the chat. We'll plan on addressing all of the questions at the end of the session. And then also, we will be sending out a link to the recording of the webinar. So in case you miss certain aspect or want to share it with your teammates, you'll be able to share that link as well. And with that, Luis, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate the introduction. Want to thank Victoria also for inviting me to the webinar. This is pretty exciting. I've been a number of things in the past. Certainly a certified instructor, Adobe certified instructor has been one of them. Just to give you kind of a brief history on the who I am and the where I come from kind of a thing, I'll just kind of go way back in time here a bit. And just to say that, I started pretty much when I was 19 years old in kind of the world of automation and technology as it relates to design. I built my first automation template at about 19. I was introduced to the technology. At that point, I was using FrameMaker, but I was learning just kind of how design at scale really operated back then. And that really kind of piqued my interest in terms of just efficiency, creative design, applications, you name it. But essentially, the propeller hat was spinning very fast at a very young age. From there, I got to grow my wealth of knowledge and experience by going to New York City, taking up other positions in some pretty large companies, working as kind of production manager, working as a design manager, manager of people, and manager of workflows and processes. And I did that for a number of years. Excuse me, working in kind of the marketing magazine industry. And then I got into kind of financial printing. And over the years, new opportunities provided not only, financial growth, but also just professional growth and an opportunity for me to grow my wealth of knowledge as it related to the different forms of advertising, marketing, creative design, and the technology attached to it. Fast forward a couple of years, and I was offered an opportunity to become a software instructor. And what that allowed me to do is take all of those years of hands-on experience, actually doing the design work, the production work, executing the back end of the actual printing and manufacturing of these designs in various capacities, and leverage all that experience and put it to use in terms of being an instructor. One of the things that people kind of gravitated towards relative to my approach to instruction was that I wasn't a book-led instructor. I was very much able to kind of relate to the users, to the designers that were attending my sessions, and they were able to bring up questions and get real-world answers as to the things that they were faced with on the day-to-day. So having started as kind of a designer that learned to evolve into these other things really kind of lended itself well to being able to relate to people, as my experience went on and as my roles changed. But I think professionally, being an Adobe software instructor really helped me kind of expand not only my breadth of knowledge, but my breadth of knowledge relative to how everybody else was working, what everybody else's experiences were. Shortly after being a software instructor, being an Adobe certified instructor, excuse me, I got to join kind of corporate America with one of these Fortune 500s and really kind of understand how large companies tended to work. And what I was able to do there was a number of things. Number one was the engineering part of my skill set really flourished. So I was a manager of people there, designers particularly that were production designers that were asked and tasked to do a lot of work over and over and over again. I think at one point there were 30, almost 40 individuals under my supervision when I first arrived. And the first point was my first objective was to really kind of get everybody up to speed in terms of like skill sets. So getting all these designers up to the point where they're extremely efficient as possible, so that they can support agency and marketing needs. Once we got everybody working on a level playing field, it was really apparent to me that the technology really needed to step in to help them accommodate scale. And that's what kind of pushed me towards understanding, okay, how do I, if not buy or purchase or look for software, how do I create software solutions that'll help these designers be more efficient, be able to deliver at scale with more efficiency, and how do we do this over and over again? What's a repeatable process? At that point, there wasn't anything on the market that could achieve what this company needs. This company happened to be Staples. So I had to architect it from scratch. So again, propeller hat was just spinning in overdrive, and I helped to architect a solution for them. They're still using that same process, that same architecture. And once that was kind of up and running, it opened me up to other parts of the agency: display, advertising, SEO, excuse me, search, and digital. Mind you, this is like 18, 20 years ago. So the industry as a whole was quite different back then. We had an entire slew of creatives that were working 24/7, trying to pump out creative assets, advertising assets for display, for search, for site, multiple channels that weren't nearly as expansive and vast as they are now, especially with mobile becoming what it is now. But they were still struggling with just scale. Like they had a team of people trying to produce display advertising as quickly as possible. Again, kind of observing the nature of the business, the requirements of the business, what became very apparent is that there was no way for them to accommodate scale given the technology they were implementing, which was almost none, and still trying to meet the breadth of content that was necessary in order to get to customers. So I got involved in kind of trying to understand kind of the problem, and the delta between where we are or where we were and where we wanted to be, and that became a long conversation about how do we solve for this in an automated way? How do we create a solution that solves for that? Again, 20 years ago, there was nothing like Viewst out on the market. So had we had Viewst 20 years ago, my day would have been very different. My weeks would have been very different. But what's amazing is though I was able to address the scale issue to some extent, it still didn't offer up the capability, the scale, and the comprehensive solution that platforms like Viewst now offer to agencies and marketing and marketers across the board. I've got a couple of things I'll share with everybody just to kind of give everybody kind of an idea of what we were working with at the time. Try not to chuckle, but and then I'll relate this kind of up to like current date experiences. So let me just bring this up and I'll share this. I think everybody should be able to see this now. So these are pretty commonplace kind of display ads, and the effort that went into kind of creating these was quite manual at the time. So every one of these pieces of creative was either a separate Photoshop file or a separate InDesign file or a separate Illustrator file. The creatives were developing the content. They were working with strategists, working with marketers, working with analysts, creative directors, associate creative directors, photographers, copywriters, and all trying to work together and communicate in order to kind of get to one version, one iteration of any one of these executables. The amount of kind of round robins there were in order to execute any one of these was multiplied by the fact that anytime there was a variant or a derivative size or derivative colorway, the conversations would start yet again. And the reason for that was obviously because every one of these components was being manually curated, it was being manually implemented into a piece of artwork. So everything was hand touched. And one of the things that you try to solve for when coming up with like innovative technological solutions is to remove that hand touch, that opportunity for error from the copy paste or from typesetting or any of that. So the excuse me, the solution that I proposed at the time, which again, this is 18 years ago, was quite literally to have their senior design director come in and create essentially templatized versions of every one of these designs, and then reverse engineer image placement, font sizes, logo placement for every single size for every one of these possible designs. Now, what that did allow people to do is go faster, right? So the output went through the roof, but every one of those designs still needed to be touched because the logic could only take you so far. And there were still kind of concerns relative to like, copy fit and so on and so forth. Again, this helped us with scale. This helped us with kind of throughput. And what it really helped is the business understand the value of and place for automation and technology to really step in and really reduce costs. People talk about cost per click a lot in this industry, and cost per click is very important, but I like to think of costs initiating right from the point of the brief. The second a brief is produced and people start talking about what it is we're looking to manufacture, cost immediately comes to my mindset as a manager, because essentially everybody who's engaged in this, everybody who does multiple rounds, everybody who's involved in having feedback and communication relative to any one of these outputs is added cost before the cost per click. So efficiency is what's going to drive value. And these new tech solutions like Viewst that come out here, these stand out in the forefront in being able to be these new tool sets for designers that enable them to do so without the fear of typos or poor designs or poor misaligned content. And I've been really excited to kind of see the evolution of this technology kind of come along over the past couple of decades. Wow, I'm aging myself, but it's been great to see. Plus, one of the other additional kind of points that I'd like to make is I'll go back to screen sharing really quickly. Is that the technology now also allows for really complex use cases beyond what I'm showing you here, right? So we all try to be as efficient as possible when it comes to kind of derivative versions, sizes. We're well aware of this, but as it relates to personalization, this is another thing, an upstanding trend, another up and coming trend that's going to persist, because the more personalized, the more direct you could be with your offers, the more you can relate to your users, the better off you're going to be, the better the results are going to be. These happen to be static images. It's no secret that moving pixels are always going to be they're always going to create better click through, better interest, and better better response to the content that you're putting on the page. Here, there's a bit of a push from Fidelity's standpoint to kind of reach out to different ethnic focuses, which is great. This is a bit more standard in terms of what we've typically seen from advertisers in various kind of aspect ratios and sizes. Again, more commonplace than not, but this is a good example. There's another version of this I failed to bring up where they tested different colorways and different things. So the ability to do A/B testing today, as opposed to 18 years ago, is quite different, because essentially 18 years ago, when everything was manual, everything was a multiplier of N. Now you're able to do these things basically almost at a click of a button, where you could do these split A/B tests, change colorways, change backgrounds, change products, and it's almost the reduction in effort, or the reduction in cost is almost somewhere in the order of like 10x, if not more. This is the same framework, different colorways, different offer, but essentially the configuration is what gets you through to this scale. Okay, we're at a good point to tie everything together. So I logged into my Viewst account, and I've got a demo creative here that we can look at. And when you first click in, you'll notice you've got a slew of tools on the left-hand panel with some suggested options for placement of text. You've got options here for images. You've got mine and discovery tab here. Under mine, you'll notice I've got 2 images, very small thumbnails, which is fine, and a logo, which is all part of the creative. There's also suggestions for buttons. Again, this is more so for ideas than anything else, but you can import your own creative as I have here. So the right-hand side of the panel is all contextually aware. So depending on what you click on, tools will change, options will change. Zooming out a little bit, just so you can kind of see the creative that's been brought in. You'll see I've got the ability to crop and size. This ad actually looks pretty great. So this would be a starting point for our creative relative to the automation that I spoke about that we developed at Staples. We'd run processes over the top of this now, code over the top of this to try to extrapolate all of these XY coordinates and really advanced positioning and math and what have you. But it wouldn't be perfect. No matter what, it would require some adjustment. So just to kind of demonstrate the scalability of this tool, if we now wanted to go ahead and pivot and add a size, we could say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select a display size, and I'm going to grab this horizontal. I'm going to grab this vertical. You'll see it gives you the option now to choose these 2 sizes. And then choosing these 2 sizes, the backend is going to go ahead and create these 2 sizes. And what you'll notice is that there's all of the content is now driven to the page, and you've got the ability to come and edit things. So the application is trying to learn what it is you're trying to do. It's going to take its best effort to create the design that you have in mind. I'm going to zoom in here and just kind of reorganize things really quickly. The beauty of what I'm doing is that everything I'm doing is very familiar to me because of the tool set that we typically be using as designers, relative to like Adobe Photoshop or InDesign or Figma. Once I get these relatively positioned and I'm happy with those, I can actually select things as a group, which is really nice, and then move them in tandem. You still have the ability to resize font sizes if you'd like, but the ability to reposition everything and move things around very quickly. It's a really nice option. I'm going to zoom out real quick. Not spending too much time on this, but I can, now that I've got so much image left up at the top, what I can do is select my content here, move these guys all down, get them right about there. Select my image up top since I've got so much image there, and I'm going to call that good. Going back to all sizes, I can take a look at this horizontal leaderboard and see what we have here. And I'm going to zoom out again. Looks like our image is placed, which is fine. Don't want it necessarily off the pasteboard, but I'm going to go ahead and reposition. Put that in here, and I'll zoom in. Based on design standards, all designers are going to have your typical kind of corporate look and feel, kind of brand guidebooks or brand books on what your rules and design parameters are for all these things, all these components. But hopefully what you're seeing is that in a matter of a minute or so, you're able to really quickly kind of adjust the design back into brand standards without too much heavy lifting. You could also select and use your arrow keys, shift arrow keys, again, very synonymous to the Adobe apps, the Figma apps and such. Canva has the same functionality. So all very familiar to designers in their current tools for work. Again, the shift select allows you to have a lot of control over things. So if I need a little more horizontal space, I can move things over. You zoom in back out. You can call this pretty much done. From here, we could also, add, excuse me, incremental sizes. Um, so we could come back to display and say, okay, I'm going to add another horizontal and another vertical. Um, the app will take its best pass, and both of those create now new derivatives of both the horizontal and the vertical. And you'll see that these now are following kind of the same thematic placement of the previous two that you've created. And these are a lot closer in kind of layout and design and placement as the other two were. So this is excellent. This is really, really going to help you be able to kind of scale and go to market faster. Another additional kind of feature, which I just love, is the ability to use our function for creating variations. So you'll recall that I said that I have another image loaded here. The ability to come in here now and create a derivative variation is really powerful, because if I want to add a variant, you'll notice that I have the image selected. I can actually create a variant where I can create a new variant image, and I can go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to use a new image for this as a variant, and I am going to select this alternative image. So for A/B testing or just for coverage and creating more outputs, I can actually leverage this. And if I go ahead and back out to all of the sizes, you'll actually see that all of the other derivative sizes we'd worked on are also updated to that image. Right now, I'm envisioning a lot of oohs and ahs going on in the audience, which is awesome because that's immensely powerful. And you can create more derivatives. So if you are really kind of conscious of your audience and your segmentation, you could use that as a tool. But that again becomes very, very powerful relative to getting closer to be in touch with your audience, really recognizing your audience. I did mention kind of moving pixels and kind of animation being, it's something that really captures the audience. Up at the top, there is a tab for animation. And if we click on that, you'll see that there are components here that are animated, which is kind of fun. So between your call to action and your offer, you'll notice the controls down here all represent each item on the actual design. And there, you'll notice they got cards and invitations here. You'll notice that the thumbnail at the very bottom there is basically representing the cards and invitation text. And if we want, we can go ahead and modify its starting point and its distance traveled. So I'm just going to go ahead and increase this slightly. And I'm going to go one more. Let's see. We'll go at like 400, and then we're going to preview this. And there we go. One additional thing that I think the technology does really, really well to serve is for localization use cases. Viewst offers up the ability to now bind and tie data sources with the technology stack. This is an example of what localization would look like for one piece of creative, one line of creative at Vistaprint. So Vistaprint's a global supplier of custom print products. I used to work there as a technology and innovation specialist. And the use case there was, hey, Lewis, we localized all of our content as a global company to 23 locales. So imagine every string, every piece of copy, every piece of input, from button copy to subject lines, headlines, for every one of these creatives now having to be reproduced in a Photoshop document, having to be exported every single time. And that brought with it all like an extra round of proofing, curation, commentary, and so on and so forth. So imagine, all of these people that have input, all of this additional overhead in terms of personnel costs being added to this times 23. It was a phenomenal amount of effort. And what my automation allowed for was essentially a way to manifest and produce the content in a Photoshop file, which still didn't get us the scale that these new technology platforms like Viewst allow us to drive forth and drive forward with. The fact that we can now curate content before beginning or initiating designs, the fact that we can go ahead and produce a simple spreadsheet, if you will, of just headlines, subject lines, body copy, even identifying images and content, and tying those to bound design templates and essentially hitting go is phenomenal. The ability to go ahead and do that and add localization to it is even more enormous. That's where you drive real value. That's where you drive real scale. And that's where I see the benefit of something, like Viewst really, really, really being kind of a key utility for any company of any size. Really, you could have a designer. You could be a single designer in a small marketing agency. You could be, 1 to 5 designers in a large corporation, and you could still use this tool as essentially, a utility, a way to expand on your creative, and a way to drive scale and accuracy. So again, the tool is immensely powerful relative to standards and current standards, current trends and capabilities. I think it's excellent in that regard. One of the other last things that I think I had mentioned really quickly is the adoption and incorporation of AI relative to creating additional content for ideas. But probably more importantly, more consistent with current brands and global economies is the ability to just, I automatically default to Portuguese. It's kind of funny, but the ability to just translate, go to Portuguese and let the translation happen live and on the fly. As you can imagine, this makes the tool really, really scalable across multiple markets. You've also got the ability to tie in a CSV file for data-related production. But overall, just wanted to show you kind of a quick pass at how to leverage Viewst to the best of your abilities. But yeah, I think that just about covers it. That said, Victoria, I didn't know if you had any questions or if you wanted to add to any of that.
Luz, first of all, thanks a lot for your presentation. And yes, I have a quick question. Since you've been working with different tools and very powerful like Photoshop and Animate and a bunch of others like you mentioned Vista and probably Celtra, I believe. So I totally understand that, designers got used to their way of doing things. And how do you find it, the current state of Viewst capabilities, like how much of actual, production needs it's already cover and how much we need to develop further in order to kind of, help designers to, for instance, maybe even fully switch and change their workflow in terms of improving their production, not designing, but production flexibilities and capabilities.
Sure. So the larger solutions, like the Celtras of the world, while they're extremely powerful, they do come with a pretty significant learning curve. My experience is also that whenever you come into an engagement with those types of platforms, that you require quite a bit. There's an onboarding process, and it requires a lot of people to be involved in introducing such a heavy platform. That said, it's quite a bit of work to get out of that platform should you choose to decide to come away from a platform like that. So there's technical complexities and kind of from a business standpoint, there's complexity in kind of getting into an engagement with them and kind of coming out. And that's my personal experience. It's what I know. It's not to say their product is bad or inferior or anything like that. It's just to kind of say things as what they are. Now that said, again, the depth of knowledge that's required to really utilize those types of tools to the extent that you get back the return on the investment, it's hard to capture. Like, you've really got to be diligent about the usage, the people that are using the tool, the throughput, the output. And we had not seen that with my experience with those larger platforms. They were great in terms of their utility, but in terms of like the onboarding, the term in terms of like acceptance and kind of utilizing it within these businesses, there was something to be had, and the value wasn't necessarily there, which is what leads companies to move on at some point. So from a designer perspective, the feedback is always, while designers aren't, for a great majority, they're not opposed to learning new things. However, there is this kind of thing of like designers are very efficient in kind of working in the way that they're used to working. Some designers are more accepting of it, some aren't. Change management is a thing when it comes to onboarding these larger platforms. You have to introduce a new way of working. And that can be a difficult pill for some people to swallow, honestly. As an instructor, change management is kind of a thing. Like, some people don't want to leave the old version of software and go to this version. I didn't like this new button. I don't like where it is now. I don't like this new menu. And that was something I faced, every day. Change management is a thing. This is why I think Viewst, with a simplified kind of UI and UX, is kind of endearing to those designers, because number one, you could take your creative as it is and you don't have to rebuild from scratch. Not to say the other platforms force you to do that. I'm just speaking to kind of Viewst specifically. You can kind of take your creative and leverage it immediately. And while you're in the tool, anything that you need to do in terms of scaling to multiple sizes is a click away. Modifying text, aligning text, all of those things are analogous to the environment that you're used to working with today in the software suite that these designers are using every single day. The beauty of Viewst in terms of the onboarding is that it's fairly straightforward. You don't need engineers, you don't need security people, dev. You don't need an entire dev stack in order to kind of get you on board and get you onto the platform and start even testing the capabilities. You can immediately walk in, check it out, and just see it for what it is. And long story short, it's, in my opinion, the amount of work it takes for you to get on a larger platform, finally set up a test, finally run something in terms of, like, let's see how fast I can scale and automate, one given campaign, as opposed to Viewst, is like night and day. You can't just go ahead and fire something up in these larger platforms and just go back to your manager and be like, hey, you know what? I saved 10x there. It normally would have taken us 80 hours, 100 hours. It took me 8. It took me 10. It took me 0.5, whatever the case may be. As a designer, and as an innovation architect, I was the guy that would typically ruffle a few feathers and go ahead and put my nose where it didn't belong and solve for things that people weren't necessarily asking for, because they were in that mindset of, this is the way we've always done it. Go back to Staples 20 years ago, and the way we've always done it, it was manual. It was 4 people producing 12 display ads per week. When I was done with my version of automation at that point, we were producing like 3,000 a month. And what I said is, now your overhead cost relative to the designer hours at desk time is essentially evaporated. You could take that cost, you could take that expense and put it towards ad spend. And now you've got this volume of outputs that you can decide whether or not you want to use 100% of that output, the 3,000 ads, or you want to use a percentage of them. It didn't really matter, because the cost was the same in terms of the production and the executions. Platforms, Viewst allows you to do that. Viewst allows you to go ahead and say, produce every derivative size that I possibly have, and just let it come through. And then on the back end, you could send it up to your managers or the strategists or the marketers and say, hey, this is the production that we've created. You can decide where to put your ad spend now. And it's not an end multiplier. It's not like if you need to produce 10 versions of this, it's that level of effort times 10. That's not what it is anymore. And to me, that's the biggest impact that a platform like Viewst is going to give you. It's that ability to scale, like truly scale with efficiency. And that's just great.
So just a reminder to the folks on the webinar, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. And while we're waiting to see if any questions come up, I actually have a question for the audience. And if you could just respond in the Q&A with a simple yes. Do you find yourself spending more time creating or versioning assets versus creating original assets? So if you want to respond to that, just respond yes. If you're spending more time creating or versioning assets than creating original assets. I see one yes so far. And I think this really speaks to what Lewis was saying around, it really touches on a lot of aspects in what he was talking about in terms of change management and efficiency. I think for most designers, I've yet to meet a designer that has more fun creating versions of assets and creating original assets. And again, I think what the Viewst platform really frees you up to do is to spend more time on that high value work of strategy, concepting, and creating original assets. and then leave the kind of the low value work, if you will, to automation and delivering that. So I'm seeing yeses across the board so far in terms of people are responding. And again, if anyone has any specific questions, also feel free to drop them into the Q&A.
Steve, you make a really great point, because I think that was the point I was trying to make to the executive leadership relative to my, inserting myself into the process, which is to say, the spray and pray methodology of like just volume of content going out there was kind of the approach. And the argument was, okay, why wouldn't we automate that and make the production associated with the production, the overhead of those ads be pennies on the dollar, as opposed to, $10, $20, $30, $40 an hour per person whose hands have to be touching these things. And it's a significant change there, because what the designers are allowed to do then is be more targeted in their work, more targeted in their efforts, in producing, the banner ads that may reside on the site that are personalized, kind of the examples that I showed before with Fidelity, where, creatives could be focusing their efforts on higher margin clients, specifically for whatever channel it is that they're looking to produce for, and let these high scale throughput mechanisms like Viewst, these platforms, really drive and fill that content gap that exists today for every marketer, for every company who's trying to get out there and really cover a wide swath of customer. Yeah, it's a completely valid point.
And I have one more question, since there's no in Q&A. So, Luis, you've been working with many different brands and a different group of designers. So, could you tell me how often is the case when designers are working with engineers in order to automate process? And maybe you saw this many times. Then my next question is, okay, how scalable it is? Because, with this modern technology, like Viewst, for instance, right, this is like kind of very scalable. You just connect your feeds with different assets, and then you change your template and create like many versioning with a single click. But maybe I don't know, maybe in the agencies, or maybe in-house agencies inside the brands, they still use kind of coding in order to automate things.
Yeah, they still do. So many agencies still have essentially in tandem, they have essentially either developers or engineers that work in tandem with the designers. And what that does is really draw back your scale. One of the things I tried to implement was, when HTML5 came around, was essentially a portal where creatives could go ahead and bring in their static imagery and then adopt, some really basic kind of functionality in terms of animation or interactivity through HTML5. That was a very templatized and very basic approach. The fact that you could do that in Viewst with a number of simple selections is phenomenal. And the fact that you can get your interactive ad as an output, click away, again, it's that solution to scale and throughput that you could not get today. The reason that static ads are so common is because they're so much easier to produce. Many agencies lack that depth of knowledge, or that engineer type, or the designer who is an engineer as a resource to go ahead and produce those types of things. But again, even if they do have somebody like myself who could work with these designers to get that kind of into HTML5 output, you're still kind of faced with a scale problem where you have two people working on something on individual ads, kind of moving things along. Even though I built like a level of automation, it was a simplified level of automation that still kind of brought scale into question, because you couldn't solve for it to the extent that Viewst can. I see the question popped up there: can you create rich media ads on the platform? And that kind of ties in nicely to what we're talking about.
Maybe I can add to this. So basically, the capabilities of the platform, they allow work with rich media at a very basic stage right now. But again, since being like pretty young solution. You know, we are very so we ask our customers to provide as many feedback as possible, and if we have enough demand for, you know, developing this automation for rich media ads, yeah, so like we have all the basics in order to develop this. Like I kindly ask you to maybe follow up by email with your request, like what kind of rich media ads you work with and what automation you're looking for. It would be really helpful.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay. Well, Vicky, I don't know if you want to say anything to kind of close us out. Lewis, if you want to say anything to close us out.
I just want to say thanks for the opportunity. It's always great speaking with you both. I think you know, I'm excited to see what's coming down the line from Viewst. It's already a spectacular platform. Rich media, I'm sure, is around the corner. All of the possibilities. Yeah, propeller hat's going. It's always going, but it's going a little faster whenever I jump onto the platform and start thinking about the potential that's there.
Right.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lewis, Steve, and yeah. So first of all, thanks a lot for attending and for the presentation. And like we'll definitely follow up with the recording, and I will personally follow up with you know, the on the question of rich media ads. So I'll provide probably like screen sharing video, you know, and we'll be waiting for your other requests in terms of rich media development.
Great. Well, thanks again, everybody. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. And thanks for joining the webinar.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.